Good morning, everyone. Thank you. Welcome to our CHAD discussion this morning, our China Ambassador Dialogue. And thank you so much for being here on a Wednesday morning early. We really appreciate your support of our project, and we look forward to discussing the goals of our project and working with you over the next couple of months. So I'm Jeff Howitt. I'm the Humanities Director for the One Voice Project and the Social Studies teacher at Charter, as you know. And I wanted to start by, I know that some of you are very familiar with the One Voice Project in the past and some of you are not. So I wanted to do a quick backstory on what is the goal and the origin of the One Voice Project, and then I'll turn it over to our fabulous ambassadors who will be leading the discussion today. So the One Voice Project goes back about a decade now, till after, right? It was born after 9/11, September 11th, 2001. When we watched that tragedy unfold and the aftermath of that, we decided that we wanted to, well, humanize the relationship between Natomas Charter students and students in the Middle East. And so we developed a partnership with our first partner school, the Sungur Bey Academy, which is in Niğde, Turkey. And we sent a team of teachers over there to have a dialogue with their students. Through that dialogue, we found values that we have in common. And I wanted to read you the original values of the first One Voice arc so that you have an understanding of the values that we found between ourselves and the students in Turkey. So the original values were family, faith, education, growth, understanding, connecting with others, and a desire for peace. Once we found those values that our two communities had in common, we then created art to express those values. I should say that we as a charter community, the staff, the students, created that art, and so did their community. And then we put on the original One Voice production, which was held here in Sacramento in 2010, and then we took to Niğde, Turkey in 2011. Now here we are in Arc 2 of the One Voice Project. This time we are trying to establish seeds of friendship with students in China. So to that aim, in August and September of this year, we took a team of 7 student ambassadors and 4 teachers over to China as part of a 30th anniversary tour celebrating the partnership between the city of Sacramento and our sister city of Jinan, China. So we traveled through China, went to about 5 different cities, different sites, and our main goal was to work with the students at the Shandong Experimental School in Jinan, a school of several thousand. And we experienced art with them, we experienced dialogue with them. And so what you're going to see today is some of the performances that our students did there, some of the performances that their students did when we visited them, and try to draw some connections between them. I want to make sure that we know that the stakes are kind of high here. I mean, anyone who pays attention to the news knows that the relationship between the United States and China has some tension to it, right? We know the differences very clearly. China is a communist nation. We are a democracy. We, the United States, have the #1 economy in the world. They will be the #1 economy in the world, like it or not, America, in about 10 to 15 years. We are the #1 military superpower on the planet. They are an emerging military power, and they desire respect from the international world. So if we pay attention to those tensions, we can see clearly that if something doesn't happen, we will have a collision with China. My argument and the project's argument is rather than have some collision, why don't we have cooperation? All right? And, we may not be able to alter the views of governments and policies, but I know that we have the power to create international goodwill and understanding. So we have that power, and we intend to use that power. Going back one more to our original experience in Turkey, it was a good friend of mine, Ibrahim, who guided us on our first voyage. And he likened the One Voice project to the creation of a Turkish carpet. I don't know if you know, beautiful Turkish carpets, very strong, valued around the world. And they're made through the connection of individual pieces of cloth. What Ibrahim said was, our One Voice project in some ways was weaving a carpet. We were drawing people together through strong threads. So when there are national crises, we can pull on those threads and pull on our friend that we met across the ocean. So our One Voice project in Turkey helped to create this beautiful tapestry of goodwill, and we aim to do that again now with China. This time perhaps it won't be made of threads that make Turkish carpets. Perhaps this time we will pull on threads of silk. And maybe through strong threads of silk we can create a tapestry of goodwill that will cross the Pacific. So those are lofty goals, but I know we can do it. And so what I would like you to do as our audience today and as members of our NCS community, we really want you to look for similarities. Similarities between what you see from the people we interacted with in China and what you see expressed by our students. We're hoping we can turn those similarities into our values, the values that we share between their community and ours. And then together, our community and our sister school community will create art to celebrate those values and speak to the world in one harmonious voice. So we're going to start today with a video of a performance, one of our favorites from the trip. It was at the top of Mount Tai, which is one of the 5 sacred mountains in China. And I hope that you are inspired by it and that you enjoy it. Thank you.
I'll meet you there. of the promised land. We'll see the road to the sky, the road to the sky. From the realization of the promise is needed. From the realization of the promise is needed. From the realization of the promise is needed. We'll see the road to the sky, the road to the sky. We'll see the road to the sky, the road to the sky. We'll see the road to the sky, the road to the sky.
Go ahead,
Job. Job. I understand.
Push them all out. It's like that. We get a picture of the roller coaster. Wait, pictures? Yeah, pictures.
Yeah, why don't you guys?
Pictures, yeah.
Now, Jocelyn, get in the picture with them. Picture? Picture?
Or not.
All the girls, all the artists.
Should get on there, Maggie.
Maggie,
Got it, Mr. Polly?
Hold on, Maggie's coming.
Yes. Oh, yes. Come for the Peace. Yes.
Hello everyone, my name is Maggie Alvarez and I am one of the 7 One Voice ambassadors who was honored with a trip to China. And I'd like to thank you all for coming here today. 有朋自远方来，不亦乐乎. This is the Mandarin phrase that I had the pleasure of learning while traveling in China. The phrase means, isn't it a great pleasure to have friends coming from afar? And I realized that this phrase traveled us all over China, whether it was spoken during the delegation meeting, integrated into our performance, spoken by the mayor of Jinan, or even written on a souvenir fan that I received. When I first arrived in China, it was the first time that I felt like a complete outsider. I couldn't understand a single thing anyone was saying. It was just a complete barrage of Mandarin. And I was jealous of my tour guides, that they were able to speak with the thousands of people that we met each day, and I couldn't. By the end of the trip, I realized that I developed a need to learn Mandarin, so that one day I can go back and meet with these people one-on-one and have experience with them without a language barrier. Notice how I did not say, if I can go back. I will go back. I need to. Along with my need to learn Mandarin, I also developed a need to travel more, so that I can travel all over the world and experience moments with people one-on-one and understand each country's culture. And culture followed us all over China. Every day, we were experiencing something new, whether it was from their language, their dances, their music, or just the way that the people talked to each other on the streets. And as I slowly began to embrace this new culture, I realized that the phrase, isn't it a great pleasure to have friends coming from afar? The phrase is very true. You may think that when first hearing it, it simply means, oh great, new people are coming over from far places and we get to make friends. How fantastic! And of course that's a big part of it. But really the phrase means that with the welcome of new friends, we are able to learn about a completely new culture. And in return, we are able to share our own culture with them. And there was plenty of sharing culture while on our trip. Many of our students here in Natomas Charter created postcards, which we passed out to people all over China, as you can see here. Each person was so happy to receive a postcard. And some of them even tried to practice their English with us by reading the stories to us. They were all really good. And you may think that this might not exactly be the best way to share culture, but in a way it is. Each of those postcards is a personalized story from our students. They talk about how their lives are shaped every day by the places and things around them. How their society changes them, how their friends changes them, how their influence on the art changes them. And we shared our stories with them. And in return, they shared their stories with us through art, music, dance, and language. So I implore you, if at any time in your life you have the opportunity to travel abroad, take it. It may seem a little daunting, what with very expensive airfares and the thought of going to a completely foreign and unknown place, but it's worth it. One Voice's goal is to establish peace and unity through the arts and culture. But how can we achieve that without understanding another society's culture? So please, travel, experience culture, and learn. Thank you.
Hey everyone, my name is Vlad Matthias, and I would just like to say, China is a beautiful country. I don't know how else to simply put it. From ancient palaces and temples filled with rich history, to parks and gardens filled with serenity and peace, to busy streets filled with China's workforce, culture was teeming everywhere we went. I was positively overwhelmed, but especially curious. My fellow One Voice members can tell you, I would get distracted and then wander off to admire essentially everything. I found beauty in spectacle skyscrapers and monuments, but I also found beauty in the smallest things like patterns in the concrete and I even got lost in the designs of warts on trees. Throughout the trip, I'd say to myself, wow, I'm really in China. And so, the beauty and architecture of China truly resonated for me in this trip. The very first city we arrived in, basically the first impression of the nation, was Shanghai. It seemed apparent that China's architecture seemed more well-developed than America, and there were really no signs of stopping or slowing. We witnessed countless grand buildings still underway, with many construction workers living next to the construction site. 20 years ago, none of those buildings were there. They were all field. Some of those are even American-owned corporations. If you look closely, you can see a Citibank building in the corner right there. The West has definitely influenced China architecturally, and it seems like China wants to show how capable they are of achieving greater things. Right from the start of the trip, I had already realized how dedicated China is to advance in general, architecturally, economically. Just as a nation, they want to emerge from the state they originally were at. But what had caught my eye the most was the juxtaposition of these new modern buildings and these old traditional ones. We would be standing right in front of the Grand Hotel we were staying at, and literally right across the street, we would see a neighborhood that looked at least 100 years old. I found out that it was a Jewish immigrant neighborhood it was a Jewish immigrant neighborhood built in the 1930s, but is now populated by the Chinese working class. Being surrounded by such new buildings, I would have thought something this old would be built on top of already. That was the first indication to me how important historical preservation was for China, and throughout the trip, it became more abundant. We visited many touristy locations in China, one of which was Mount Taishan, which was a mountain we saw a video of earlier. Sabrina, Willie, Aiden, and I all together climbed to the very top, and at the top was a big factory producing smoke that I initially thought were rain clouds from the bottom. However, also inhabiting the top, kind of in a corner, was an old Taoist temple. I was confused as to why they didn't build another factory there, since they easily could have. what I think was so great is that even though they chose to keep such a non-financially beneficial building, it was clear to see how important that temple was to the mountain, rather than simply making more money. I feel like we visited China at the perfect time. I initially thought we were there solely in a time of construction and a transition, as if all the old buildings would be replaced at some point in the future, which they might. But what I ultimately learned is that China wants to find that balance of preserving their rich, unique history while advancing architecturally and technologically. Where there were grand hotels, there were old neighborhoods. Where there were factories, there were temples. Where there were automated ticket booths, there were natural springs. They do not want to throw away what made China what it is now, because although money is valuable, history is priceless. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Aiden Leo, and what I learned when I was in China is that the people of China are extremely proud to be Chinese. They're extremely proud of what their country has done and what their government has accomplished in just the past few decades. Now, the American perception, as Mr. Pollard mentioned earlier, the American perception of the Chinese government is sort of a negative view on communism, on the government, and on their way of life. American media shows the Chinese government as usually kind of threatening and militaristic. So while One Voice was in China, we all had sort of this kind of negative interpretation of what China was actually like. But as we experienced the people, we also experienced their opinions, and we experienced the pride that they have in their country. What I learned when I was in China is that in the past century, to say the least, China has had a really rough history. World War I starts, World War I ends, China split up. World War II starts, and is taken over by the Japanese Empire. A communist revolution arises in the country, and a civil war starts. The Chinese government finally started to extend themselves within just the past about 40 to 50 years. And within those 40 to 50 years, they are already on the verge of becoming the biggest economic superpower in the world. So you can kind of just imagine the sense of accomplishment and the pride that they feel because of how much they've done in such a short span of time. All of the people that we talk to seem to have so much pride in their country and being Chinese. There was one lady in particular. It was in Shanghai. Miss Pollard and her engaged in a little conversation, and Miss Pollard says, "Where are you from?" The lady proudly responded, "Well, I am from the birthplace of Chairman Mao." For those of you who don't know, Chairman Mao was the leader of the Communist Revolution in China. Now, to me, this really stood out to me because it not only said that the Chinese are still they still believe in a lot of those communist ways, but those aren't necessarily a bad thing. Like I said earlier, the American media shows communism as sort of this negative thing, when the Chinese think of it as this way of finding a truly equal society. I think that really stood out as one example of national pride. And there was another example, and it was the morning before we went to Beijing. That morning, it was the 70th anniversary of the ending of World War II. So in Beijing, there was a parade going on. Along with the whole country of China, One Voice watched the parade on this big kind of jumbo sort of like TV screen in a museum in Jinan. As we watched the tanks, helicopters, missiles, and soldiers march down the street of Tiananmen Square, it did look a little threatening. And to a lot of Americans, it would be seen as threatening. But then you have to look at it in the Chinese perspective. The Chinese don't look at it as such a threatening thing. They look at it as a sense of accomplishment and a sense of pride. Because 70 years ago, at the end of World War II, the military, the government, was all so weak. And look how far they've come, just 70 years later. We can even look at the infrastructure of China. The infrastructure of China, in just the past 40 to 50 years, went from being a relatively rural and impoverished country to being one of the most heavily populated countries on the planet, with the fastest economic growth. The buildings and structures that we came across, they were beautiful, they were massive, and frankly, everywhere that we went. I feel that China takes so much pride in the modern beauty that the people have created in just such a short span of time. And so, basically, my big takeaway from the trip is that the Chinese people are hardworking, generous, open, and hospitable people. And they have a lot to be proud of. And they have a lot of pride in their country. Thank you.
My name is Jocelyn Kilpatrick, and I'm here to talk a little bit about the cultural differences between China and America and how we view ourselves as Americans versus how China sees us and how the world sees us. Throughout our travels through China, my main goal was to bring back a piece of the culture through my photography. I wanted to capture an honest representation of what it means to be a part of the Chinese society. And one thing I noticed during our travels was that every time we would leave a designated destination, the beautiful, clean buildings would start to fade away, and all I could see were people on the streets. Jobless, hardworking people. Allow me to put this into perspective for you. In China, there are currently 300 million people living in poverty. 300 million people. That is equivalent to the amount of people living in the United States. It is important for us as Americans to realize that we are not the only people in the world. We aren't even the majority. We are only a small piece of a very large world that is so far ahead of us it is ridiculous. And most of the time, Americans tend to look at China like this. China and America are always reaching for something, a goal that they can never achieve without each other. And it's a pointless uphill battle. However, we should be working with China more like this. We should be learning from them, respecting them, pushing them to become a part of us and cooperate with them as we would each other. So often it seems like Americans are supposed to be in competition with other countries. We have generated a mindset that unless we are established as the #1 country, we are defeated. But the reality is that China will soon pass us up as the #1 economy in the world. But there's nothing wrong with that. It is time to stop looking at China like we are in competition with them. We are all human, and we should all be treating each other with the same respect and dignity that we would want to be treated with. I'd actually like to take this time to ask you guys to... I've chosen a select number of pictures, 3 or 4, and I'd like to take a moment to ask you guys to give us some descriptive adjectives that we can later use in our project to kind of create the... to kind of establish some boundaries and some main themes that we can use. So if you guys just want to raise your hand or shout it out, I'd love any response. Yes? Family. That's very true. I'd like to actually touch on that very quickly. One thing that I noticed was that everywhere we went, there were these parents and these children. And these parents were so deeply proud and in love with their children. You know, we think of these people, we think of the Chinese nation as kind of strict, and we don't expect them to be so loving. However, they are more in love with their children and their families than you would ever imagine. And we were lucky enough to be welcomed into one of their homes, and they were talking to us and speaking to us as if we were their family. Next slide, please. Anyone else? Would anyone like to touch upon it? Don't be shy. Yes, Brian.
Community.
Community, absolutely. Yes, Ms. Granger.
Oh, I think in the last generations.
Okay, well, next slide. One thing that I noticed here is that especially with the elderly community, they had such a respect for everyone who was older than them, and they would stick so firmly to their traditions throughout everywhere we went. They were so kind, and they were just very welcoming. Would anyone like to say any last words? Okay, well, thank you very much for your time.
Hi, my name is Willie Huggins, and I will be talking to you guys today about China and the connection and community of the people. And I hope you guys have so far enjoyed what my fellow ambassadors have been talking to you guys about. Visiting China for me was such an amazing and intriguing experience I never thought I would be able to do. I remember when I first found out that I was going to be going to China, I told my dad, and I was like, Dad, I'm going to China. He was like, great, I don't know what that means. But, after coming back from China, I now know what that means. I was not used to getting stared at so much, but that was probably because, I was a black kid in China. There's probably a lot of people like, whoa, what's he doing here? But one thing that was apparent throughout my entire trip there was the people and their positive desire for change. I remember the first time we performed in China was at the Pearl TV Tower that you guys saw in an earlier picture. And performing there was such an amazing and captivating experience because even though they might not have understood what we were singing to them, you could tell that they were capturing the essence of what we were trying to get them to see. But their reaction showed me that they understood our idea of wanting change and peace. Even when I had to say my Mandarin phrase, and I'm going to say it for you guys right now. 学学为学学，不学为不学，学学也. Now, it took me a long time to get that down. You can ask my fellow ambassadors and people who went on the trip. It was very hard for me to do that. Mandarin is very, very hard. But I was really honored to be able to say that Confucius saying, and that saying is, to know what you know, you have to know what you don't know. And I felt that that is an important thing for us to not only value, but to realize and want to explore those connections with each other beyond our own boundaries within our countries. And the people within China all had a very enriched influence of their culture in their daily lives. Some of the shops we went into had items that represented Buddha or Confucius and all these things, and I was just so amazed at how they were so enriched with their own culture. And it was really fascinating to see that they were very connected spiritually and with their own beliefs, with not only their cultures, but the people around them and their families and their community. And the one day that was probably the most impactful for me was performing on Mount Tai in China. There was such a massive amount of people who were watching us, and it felt so incredible and amazing to see that this many people were watching our performance. And I truly felt that essence of what we were trying to accomplish there, which was create the awareness of change and peace and connections through the arts, by when one of the men, after we had finished singing, a Chinese man came up to me. I had no idea he could speak English at all. And he looked me right in my eyes and he shook my hand and he said, "Let's create peace together." And that left me in such awe. That is when I truly knew that what we were doing there was not only good, but it had a purpose and intent behind it. This is why I feel that the greatest takeaway from China, for me, is not only to help improve our international connections with China, but create change and peace as well. Thank you.
Good morning. How are you? Okay, so before I start my slide, I just want you guys to go back to the journey with me when I found out I was going to China. Now, I was with Claude and we all were in a room together and we were all like, oh gosh, what's going to happen? You know, those voices in your head. Anyway, so we go in and they practically tell us, okay, you're all going. And we all keep our cool, but when I run out of that room, I'm making some crazy noises with Claude and I'm running to her naked. I'm like, I saw you, wait. Hi. No. And I was running, but I think I was laughing so much and screaming because I was just in shock at the fact that I would have this opportunity that not a lot of people get. And during this time, I was trying to find myself, who I want to be, who I want to become, who I want to inspire, how I want to change myself to be better. And China in one voice really came at this moment, and that's how I knew that whatever, when I went there, I was going to come back with something that I would always keep in my heart forever. And I did. And I'm very grateful for that. So I just want to start off by saying that. Throughout my travels in China, I came back with a more broader, life-changing perspective on how I should view life and how I should view others. I'm going to start out with my big takeaway, so you all can go through this journey with me while I start the pictures. That every individual and nation has this natural ambition and desire to be better. And this is a beautiful commonality we all share with each other, but sometimes it's viewed as competition instead of a way to unite ourselves and be stronger and understand why we're here, what our purpose is. When One Voice visited the Forbidden City, we performed one of our songs, Ever Since. And, there's a lot of kids coming around, and they're like, oh, can we take your picture? I was like, sure. They're having fun. And then this lady comes. She's an older lady, and she turns my head like this, and then she holds my cheeks, and she says, this is beautiful. You are beautiful. And then she went like this, repeatedly, crossing her hands up and down. And at that moment, I felt like I was at home. Like, this lady, we have so many different things. We're different ages. We've experienced so many different life things, in life. But, it felt so heartwarming and sincere that she would say that. She was being a better person by contributing to what we were doing. And we were being better people by performing and doing what we love while trying to build connections with each other. And I think that's when it really hit me, and that's when I understood what One Voice was, And I think I will always carry that. I will carry that in my heart forever, because I felt like I was doing the right thing, and I was being better, and I was understanding and comprehending her culture while she was mine. Honestly, I think the basic solution for this is, like I said, to understand each other, in order to not view each other as competition, just understand. And I think we all came back with our own stories that have changed us. But this lady really encouraged me to keep going and keep finding and keep seeking who I am destined to be or what I should do, because, every day, the present time is all you have control over, and you should always try to do your best. And I think this is why the One Voice Project is so beautiful, and why you are all here, because we can do something, we can build something and make something together, and all of our own experiences are now hopefully influencing you to do something with this One Voice Project. And I really, really hope that you do. And this introduced the idea of exploring the world on your own terms, and I definitely recommend it, because you feel better. You feel like you did something, Honestly, instead of making each other look, like I said, as competitions, we're just trying to reach similar goals. And once we accept that, we can realize that once happiness is attainable, and it depends on what you want to do in your life, and do it with the people that you respect and you love, and just have fun. So thank you.
And I will be talking about the importance of education in schools and the drive for success. One of my favorite parts of our trip was when we had the opportunity to go to the Shandong Experimental School. There we were lucky to visit a school, but unfortunately this was the only one. During our visit, we had a discussion with them about their values, and we also got to talk about ours. We also had an arts exchange where we performed an art set for them, and they had an entire show ready for us. I want to share some of what they did and just mention that it was amazing. Here's a more classical Chinese piece. and here's a more contemporary one. All the pieces seem nearly perfect to me, and I want to mention that this was just their second day of school. Yeah, to me, it was clear that these kids are dedicated to what they do. Whether they dance, sing, or play some kind of musical instrument, it was solid. And to be able to pull out a performance like that in 2 days is amazing. But what I realized is that that is their future. How well they do in school really determines whether or not they're successful. Not that we in America don't have to worry about our future or work hard. There's just so many people in China that they're in constant competition with each other. I was really able to realize this after talking with JC, one of the students who came to visit us last year, and she stayed with my family for a few days. She's been telling me about this big test that all the Chinese seniors have to take that determines which universities that they're accepted into. It's a little bit like our SAT or ACT, just a lot bigger. She's nervous and has been studying for months now. She told me that only the students from the top universities are accepted into the higher skilled fields of work. It's obvious to me that JC and all the other Chinese students are extremely driven. Those who want to be successful in their future work hard. They know what they want and they're willing to work hard for it. Not only are they driven to do well in academics, but they take their artistic opportunities just as seriously. How many of you work extremely hard? I know charter can be challenging, but I think we're just as driven as they are. We wouldn't come to school every day and try if we weren't. I think that's an amazing thing that both us and Chinese students have in common. Thank you.